Hey, welcome back, everybody. Of course, this is Dr. Keith McNally, and this is the Question Guy podcast. And of course, this is a special edition of the Question Guy podcast because this is all about Mitch Gray. And here's the book, How to Hire and Keep Great People. And so once again, we are going through this chapter by chapter, and we have reached chapter 13, which, quite honest, Mitch, it's a really long chapter. And not only that, there's 8 questions at the end of this chapter. What in the world were you thinking? So before you
This
answer that
this
question,
this may take 5 different episodes. My bad. I was not thinking about your show when I wrote the book.
and
I
I appreciate
apologize.
that's okay. I appreciate that. So we could actually take this by piece. And I usually start with the chapter title because that really kind of it gets us thinking about what's going on inside. So it's
Yes.
just after they start creating systems to set up your team or to set your team up for success. And I love this. I so love this. I so love this because you actually break it down. So I'm not going to, read your chapter verbatim because it does break down how to set people up for success. And we've been getting to this point quite literally since chapter 2, not maybe since chapter 1, because that's all about the spirituality of your leadership paradigm. But we're now ready to get people from onboarding to get them going. Do you want me to read all 8 questions, or do you want me to pick a couple of them, or do you want to talk about this chapter from you, the author? So how do you want to approach this?
You're the host, man. You're the question guy.
I am the
You
question
get to
guy.
decide. I'm an open book. I will say though, before we move on,
Go ahead.
this so the subtitle of the book is Your Go-To Guide for dot dot dot.
Right.
So what people need to know is this is really where the guide slash manual of the book comes into play. I also want people to know, and I may have never mentioned this to you, in fact, out of all of our
Conversations.
hundreds of conversations, um, this was actually the most difficult part of the book for me to write because I am not a recipe giver. I'm a thought provoker,
Right.
not a formulaic strategist. And there's a very different mindset approach. So some people say, here's where I am. I have been successful in this area. Here's how you get there, A, B, C, D.
Right.
And they
Right.
give you steps. Okay.
And people like that.
I yes, I actually don't.
Yeah.
I actually don't believe in that process. And here's why. Because I believe everyone's path is different. And I actually believe, and the further I go in life, I believe it even more fully, that the way I arrive is going to look and be very different than how you will arrive. And so
Now
let's
that's
just take our
true even if you're holding somebody's hand, because their
yes,
experiences
yes.
of what's
So,
going on with the process is just different.
so I think it's unfair to say, here's the recipe to make your cake because it actually disallows you to be fully authentic and willing. So people talk about imposter syndrome, and we'll get back to the book in a second, but just
That's
as a
okay.
side note,
I don't necessarily agree with imposter syndrome.
what imposter syndrome actually is you disallowing your authenticity to exist. You're copycatting. And I prefer to call it copycat than imposter. And I'm like you, I think it's a mythological unicorn in the sky that people have bought into because they actually haven't built the courage to summon their own authenticity yet. So, what does that have to do with this chapter of the book? Well, it has to do with my struggle in writing a book where I don't really want to tell people the exact formula because it's going to be different. And so, in a way, I do give step by steps, but that's why I use the term guide and not manual, because a manual is a how to do it specifically. A guide is a here's some boundaries, some foundational elements. Now, within those boundaries, you get to decide what makes sense for you. And that's very, very important in a culture and society and a world where I get on Twitter and every other tweet is a 10-step thread about how to become a great speaker. No,
Right.
that's a pile of BS because it may or may not work for you. It sets this unrealistic expectation for people. I saw a tweet yesterday. Here's how I became became worth $10 million by the age of 26. Get out of here with that. Even if you do have $10 million at 26, you don't still know anything about life. No one does at 26. And so we've set this expectation that says, well, if I buy Mitch's book, I'll be able to build a great team. Maybe. I think it's a great head start. But if you don't understand who you are, why you exist, why your organization exists, you can read every great leader's book in the universe and you still won't get very far because you have disallowed your authenticity to actually shine through. And so I just want, anytime I get an opportunity to share that with people, I'm really passionate about letting people know that part of the book was a struggle for me. And in fact, my advanced reader team kept saying, no, we want more detail. We want more detail. And I kept giving and kept giving. And I'm like, man, I'm really fighting myself as a creator because really my gift and passion in life is to ignite and inspire the gifts and passions in others. And I can't tell you how to do that. I can only walk alongside you and give you permission to seek that out. And what's crazy is, Keith, before we dig deeper into the book, that's actually the epitome of hiring a great team. Is it's not about you finding out the formula. It's not about you using Indeed and Monster and LinkedIn. It's actually about you identifying who you want to be in this business world and how you want your team to be represented, and then simply discovering the people that will walk alongside you to do that. That's all hiring and recruiting is. It's not rocket science. And the fact of the matter is, Indeed and LinkedIn and Monster are making billions of dollars off of people that already have the answer.
Mm-hmm.
They just haven't empowered their own authenticity. So I talked to someone the other day who I was actually on their podcast last year. They're in the UK. And they were like, Mitch, we're having such a hard, not a client, just someone I network with.
Right.
Mitch, we're having such a hard time finding a certain person for a certain position. And my question was, well, how much recruiting have you done? And the answer is basically zero. I'm like, well, what actions have you taken? Well, we've posted it. Well, no wonder. I mean, we're getting thousands of resumes, but we don't know what direction to go with all of these resumes.
Ooh.
I know the direction. Stop asking for resumes and actually go find people. Like that's as simple. It's simple. It's like, but the reason people can't get that in their mind, like all of our human behaviors, is when it's very simple, we think it's a lie
Hmm.
because we think it should be more difficult than it is, and it's not.
Well, we
And
tend to
when
make
it's
things difficult, and we want
yes,
them to be difficult.
because it makes us feel important. It makes us feel like we've done something when it's difficult. But if it's simple, but the universal law of attraction tells us everything is simple. You don't have to hustle. You don't have to ask for 1,000 resumes. You simply have to show up. That's it. That's the answer. I've given you everything. Just freaking show up and things happen. So this part of the book is, I just riff longer than I ever have on any chapter without getting into the chapter, because it was, you can kind of see where my struggle came
Well, I
from
could
writing a
summarize the
how
chapter
to.
for you.
Yeah, it's just, and now we're also leaning into a lot of the HR pieces, which I wanted to be very careful with
Right,
because
right.
I'm adamantly not an HR person. I don't have an HR education. I don't have an HR background. Quite frankly, I find it very difficult to deal with HR people because and it's not their fault. They're so inundated in the red tape that they forget the humanity of human resources. And we've talked about that till we're blue in the face.
Well,
But
actually,
I
this is what
really,
that chapter
it
focuses
totally
on.
is. And quite frankly, through all of my struggle of writing this chapter, if an HR department would take it and apply it, it would change their world. It would change their world because it is simple. So I'm really passionate about this part of the book because it was my greatest struggle. This,
Okay.
culture design 101, another kind of guide manuscript part, manual part of the book,
Right.
another difficult chapter because it's how do we teach people to do this without teaching people to do it? That's the trick. Because I didn't want just another, here's how you lead people, here's the answer. Because I don't have the answer for everyone. I've never proclaimed to have the answer. So on to how do we onboard, how do we create success from day one? Not sex
Well,
from day one, success from day one. We want to make sure we say that properly.
so that's what it is how do you set up your team for success? But the chapter focuses on human resources stuff. And I'm not an
Yes.
HR person either, but all of the questions in the back end of the chapter talk about tell me about your onboarding process, what it looks like, how do you do it, who's doing it, what's your intention, what's the purpose. So, is there a way to marry the two words that you always talk about, the human
Yep.
with the resources. Can we marry those
Yep.
two in a department that has to go that legally has to go through some processes, but you add the fact that you should not just end it there or even begin there,
Yes.
but you start how do you start day one? So let's start there.
Yeah.
How do you start day one of a job?
Yeah. Great. To me, that is the question. I mean, you're asking the appropriate question, in my opinion. Of course, you're the question professional. Um, yes, there are legalities. So we know that in America, I am assuming that other countries have similar orderly fashions of legalities. So
Right.
we know that in America, where you and I are based, where we do the majority of our work, we need to prove that someone is eligible to work in America. Uh, with that, we need identification. With that, we need to set them up on payroll so that they're getting paid from the time they start. Outside of those three things, proving eligibility with identification and setting them up on payroll, I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care if this is the person that's going to become the janitor or the person that's your CEO. Outside of those three priorities, there really aren't vital legalities that someone has to go through before they can begin working.
Or there's ocean, then we
You
had a
can
conversation.
So
Go
you
ahead.
can do those. So you're right, there are some safety things, but you can do those alongside of getting them started. That's where people mess this whole thing up. Now,
Well,
if you're a
explain that.
crane, if you're a crane operator and you're going to be lifting stuff onto a skyline building, probably need some other things. But that's like 1% of the population. The majority, 99% of the population that are going to work every day, 98% of that is going to work in a small business because that's what 98% of our economy is.
Mhm.
They need legality from a standpoint of proving their ability to work, identification, and to make sure they're getting paid. That's it. So, my point to that is you can take care of those things really early. In fact, I'm going to push people and say, if you know you're going to hire this person, you can actually take care of those things before they begin the job. So the whole point of this is to expedite the process that is boring to everyone, even HR people, and to begin creating success from the moment they walk in the door. So if we have those out of the way, and if all I'm focused on in the first hour of this person's tenure is making sure I can prove they're eligible, making sure I have ID, making sure they're on payroll, I can take care of OSHA, I can take care of safety, I can take care of all of that stuff alongside of creating success. What does that look like? Let's say
But
I'm
that's
hiring
my
a sales,
question. What does success look like?
let's say we're hiring a salesperson.
Okay.
So a salesperson, let's just say, and I'll move on to another example in a second. So let's just say you run a retail store, and let's just say you're hiring a salesperson. You've proved their identity, their eligibility, and you've got them on payroll. That's all said and done. Took 10 minutes because it doesn't take long to fill that stuff out if you have it ready to go.
Right.
So you've taken care of that. Now all of a sudden you actually get them on the sales floor and begin training the sales process within a transaction. The mistake that most people make is, regardless of industry, well, we need to keep you in a back room to watch all these videos and then apply the process. Psychologically, from a learning standpoint, that does not work. If someone just sits and watches a video, by the way, I'm going to tie this back into your OSHA and safety question. If
Because they're all
someone
videos.
Correct. The problem with that is psychology tells us, you can look up any psychological study. It shows us that people don't retain that information. Where they do retain the information is when you can take the video and match it to action and match it to listening. So now we're gathering all 3, 4, 5 learning spheres that applies to any person and personality and learning type. And now we're giving people an opportunity. So let's take our sales example. Keith, I've done all of your paperwork the minimum amount I need to do, taking care of it. I know you're getting paid. We're good to go. Now I'm going to take you onto the sales floor. Sarah, who is our best sales presenter, maybe not our highest volume,
Mhm.
She's our best sales presenter. We've also trained Sarah how to train others. So she's earned the right of way. She's actually in the middle of a transaction helping a guest right now. So Keith, what we're going to do is we're going to have you go shadow her for a second. She knows how to get you involved in the transaction, actually how to get you involved with the guest. And then after that, we're actually going to take you back and have you watch a video that's going to directly connect what you saw and witnessed and experienced to where we want to take it to the next level. So now all of a sudden you're actually out being a part of the success from our best people right off the bat. Now you're becoming a part of the larger vision. Now you're becoming a part of the culture. You're immediately experiencing the great culture given testimony by one of our greatest teammates who has been prepped and taught actually how to train people. It's not fly by night, just throw it out there. We've actually trained Sarah how to do this. So now after an hour, hour and a half, you're pumped because you guys just did, $1,000 sale, or you just sold a $60,000 car, or whatever that looks like. Oh, by the way, Keith, since you did such a great job, Sarah loves you. We're actually going to give you a $50 bonus. Now all of a sudden it's like, wait, what? Like I've been here 2 hours and I've made my hourly wage plus a $50 bonus. Yes, I want to come back here. Oh, now I want to watch those videos as well. So now we flip the switch. It's not begrudgingly watching the videos. Now all of a sudden it's actually watching the videos again alongside someone that we've taught well, or myself as the manager, owner, whatever. And I'm going to stop the video every once in a while and be like, hey, does this make sense? Do you see how this connects with the experience you just had? Do you see how we can replicate that in our culture and why it matters? And you can do that with safety. You can do that with sales education. You can do that with industry. Let's say you're hiring a cook, and this cook has all the training, but you bring them in and you put them on the line right away. Maybe they don't have major responsibility, but right now they're just going to cut the lettuce, and they're doing a really good job. And Tony, who's back there, our other inline chef, is really helping you out and getting you pumped up. And it's like, man, Keith, you did such a great job. Our burritos have never looked better with that lettuce. Now all of a sudden we're putting life into you, and you're excited to come back. So then we go watch a video about safety, how to hold a knife, how to make sure we're measuring and calibrating the skills that you have with the culture that we desire, because we won't accept anything less. So now those videos may take 2 or 3 sessions rather than a 3-hour day one session. But you look forward to those 2 or 3 sessions because we're immediately connecting it with action. I have seen this time and time again, especially in the sales industry. I can take a person who's passionate, ready to go, knows nothing about sales, and turn them into a successful salesperson in less than a week by using the process of creating success on day one. Because being a successful person isn't about skill or talent. It's about interest and passion. And if you have someone who's interested and passionate enough, and I set them up for success and train them in the moment, now all of a sudden their interest and their skill set matches. And they go, man, I can do this. Like I can be really successful with this. And I made a $50 spiff today. Like, let's go. This is good stuff. Or I helped out a customer and they thanked me and said it was the best customer service they've ever had on day one. I'm an all-star. Like that's just, but it's almost like it's almost like my second grade teacher, Mrs. Smith, who still used the ruler to slap your hand when you didn't write your W's in cursive properly, right? It's almost like that's how
I
bosses
don't remember
want to
that
be.
part.
Oh yeah, I didn't write that in the book, but yeah, that was my second grade year. No, Mrs. Bates. I'm sorry, Mrs. Smith was my kindergarten teacher. Yeah, Miss Bates was old school. She still carried a ruler, and she'd pop you in the hand if you didn't write your W's correct. And it's almost like that's how bosses have become. It's like we're going to catch them doing wrong,
Right.
so that we can fix it right away. And my proposal is, why don't you teach them how to do things that are right, so that you don't have to put in the energy into what's wrong. And if you hire smart people, they normally figure out what's wrong. Like you normally don't have to spend that much time on it. But when you do, you've laid such a foundation of success that you've actually earned the right and permission to discipline and correct when it's time. But far too many people get it backwards. People don't get out on the floor or into the office or into, with clients or whatever until like day 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's like, what in the world are you doing? Like, why? There's zero reason to waste that much time. Even the crane operator, they can't go on the crane with another veteran crane operator from day one and learn how to actually do this the right
Well, I don't know
way.
the
The
OSHA
answer,
rules regarding that.
well, I think the answer is yes, they can. And if there are rules on it, they're dumb rules, and we need to fix them, right? Like that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And so, but again, to your point, oftentimes there's so much
Well, I have
red
another
tape
point.
involved. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Because a lot of what you talk about and write about in your books and, coach with now is building, developing, creating that culture that's intrinsic about you and really supports what you're doing in terms of your organization and business. How do you get the individual? Now you've recruited, you've done the lifestyle recruiting, and you know that they're potentially a really good fit for what you're
Mhm.
doing and what's going on inside your company. How do
Right.
you get them now because they don't really know about your culture. They know you because you recruited
Okay.
them. They're bought into, your excitement, your passion, your investment, your mission, your vision. How do you buy them into the culture? How do you build that as part of the success strategy? Is that something?
So, so if you or your best customers, clients, or your best teammates recruited that person,
Hmm.
then they actually do know your culture because you are a direct reflection of your culture.
Hmm.
So they should not be surprised when they walk in the door. Like if you recruited them and they walk in the door and see something different than what you've already shown them, that's on you. Like something isn't aligned in that moment. Like if someone experiences me through this podcast
Hmm.
and then they go hear me speak at an event
Hmm.
and then they read one of my books and then they listen to my podcast and they don't see the same culture, then that's on me. Like everything that we do, live, I mean, the very definition I use for culture is how we live, move, and exist.
Exist. Yeah. Yeah.
That is the culture. And so culture isn't a place is a reflection of culture. Culture is an energy. And so if you recruit someone, if I go to Starbucks right now and recruit my next assistant, they already know my culture. All they're seeing is the everyday manifestation of what they've already experienced. And so when I recruit someone and hire them and they walk in the door on Tuesday, because that's day one, what they should be seeing with every encounter they have is just a simple ripple of the culture they've already experienced. So what should happen is I don't have to worry about buying. In fact, I don't believe in creating buy-in. I believe in creating experiences, and those experiences give opportunity for decision. Well, if
Okay.
I've recruited, I've created an experience, and I gave that experience a question. Hey, you looking for an opportunity? Yeah, I actually am. I've got one if you're interested. Now, all I've done, they've experienced my culture because they experienced me or my best people,
Right.
or the people that encounter my culture and believe in it because they continue revisiting my business. So then I gave that experience a question. Are you looking for an opportunity? They said yes. So I capitalized on that with a response of, I might have an opportunity for you. Let's visit. And so they're already in the door. They've already bought in. There is no buy-in needed from that point forward. What actually happens, and this is even if people recruit terribly, okay, through third-party websites or whatever.
Right.
Let's say you find someone. So I have a friend right now who's looking for a job. He put out a couple of resumes last week. Let's say one of those people call him back. He has already bought into the culture, or he wouldn't have applied. Where people
But we
mess it
want to
up
make
is
it
that
successful. We want that first day to be
yes,
successful.
but that's where people mess it up. Is he's already bought into the culture, or he wouldn't have submitted his resume. Then, if they offer him the job, and 3 weeks later he hates it, it isn't because he didn't buy in. It's because they screwed it up. He already bought in by submitting his resume. That's what too many people forget. We have already created success, or this person would have never entertained working with us. So it's about capitalizing on that success. They already buy in.
Hmm.
So how do we continue to lay a strong foundation where they can taste more and more success? And that's what this chapter is about.
Well, I got no more questions because that's all I got. Don't choke on me. That was just
That's a
perfect.
lot, man. I mean, and
But it
really, to
is
be honest,
because go ahead.
this is a hard process. I mean, This beginning process, I believe, is where many companies lose great people.
Hmm.
Not they don't necessarily physically quit, but they emotionally and mentally quit.
Hmm.
Because I have never in my life had someone come up to me and go, "Man, I just did 2 weeks of onboarding and it was fire. I'm excited to go to work." I've never in my life heard someone say that. What I have seen is, and I was just on day one, and I already got a card from a client that I'm going to go try and sell them a car tomorrow. I've seen that. I mean,
Yeah.
and so it's just, again, everything we teach is just basic human behavior. People want to belong, they want a sense of purpose, and they want to do something that's really, really cool. They want to have greater vision. So, why are we not doing more of that? All that OSHA stuff, I promise, I guarantee people, if you will take this approach, all the stuff you're scared of, like OSHA, will fall to the wayside because people aren't stupid. The reason the red tape is so thick is because we're assuming people are stupid, but they're not. Litigation, it assumes people are stupid. Legalities, it assumes people are stupid because one too many people got sued from the McDonald's customer who spilled hot coffee on their, lap.
Long time
And
ago.
it's
Yeah.
like, come on, hot coffee's hot coffee, right? So why'd you spill it? I mean, that's an easy question. But because of that, everyone now fears the litigation and the red tape. My rebuttal is stop focusing on all of that, start focusing on building success. And because of the universal law of attraction that I firmly believe in, you won't have to worry about litigation and red tape. You just won't because people aren't stupid. They just aren't. And I think humanity proves that over and over and over. So I always challenge that. That's why, quite frankly, it's always interesting when I do have conversations with HR people, because in fact, I was at an event last week and I shared a story. And the person that actually helped me get the event, great person, she's an HR person. And she was in the room and I made a statement and she's like, "Don't ever do that." And I'm like, well, I don't know. Why not? You're only saying that because of your perception. I'm saying it because of my perception. And
Yeah.
guess what? It worked. It worked. It worked. And so you can't say don't do it when it works. You can say don't do it because you're scared. And that's what we have to think about, And I get it. We're so systematically large. Are we ever going to truly change it? I don't know, but that's not my business. My business is to invoke a different way of thinking. And if we can invoke a different way of thinking, one business owner at a time, then we can actually create a ripple effect that'll provide a really cool thing in the workplace. And that's all I'm worried about.
And so with that, Mitch Gray, you have summarized chapter 13 very well. And I do appreciate that without
Cheers.
actually having to ask any questions about onboarding. Mitch Gray, thank you so much. Again, your stories are awesome, and I appreciate your time as we work through how to hire and keep great people. Of course, this is a special edition of the Question Guy podcast, and we'll see you next time. Take care.